Welcome to Casa Tre Oci here in Venice, where we're lucky to have Professor Slavoj Žižek joining us to deliver a lecture on the need for a quantum theory of history. What does he mean by this? Why is it necessary today? Let's find out.
Because we live in a very specific moment of history, I think. Till now, although it wasn't true, all the big ideologies, let's say liberalism with Fukuyama, end of history, Marxism, even if they were not perfectly determinist, they thought history has a direction. It may go wrong, we may destroy ourselves, but there is a direction. No? For example, Rosa Luxemburg said the future will be socialism or barbarism. What was her mistake? Well, in Stalinism we discovered it can be both at the same time. But today, I think the situation fits perfectly the notion of superpositions in quantum physics. We live in a moment where we cannot draw one line, that's it. We are in a situation where, on the one hand, we have the remainders of this that we share, me and Lorenzo, progressive Enlightenment European dream. Then we have, it's something very different, this right-wing defense of Europe, which is precisely anti-Enlightenment. Then we have something that I sometimes call, but not because it's good, just to make it clear, soft fascism. Not this Nazi-like self-destructive, but this is basically, I think, the elementary definition of fascism. You know only capitalist market dynamic works, but you are aware of social destruction that this causes. So you combine capitalist dynamic with a strong state founded in some ethnic, religious, traditional ideology. It's China now. Xi Jinping recently said, we have to teach young people what? Not Mao, but Confucian tradition, Modi in India, Erdogan, Putin in his own way. I think if you ask me what's the most probable outcome, it's this one. So I don't believe in BRICS. BRICS de facto means not really multicentric, but a couple of centers. Russia, China, Europe is not so strong, United States, which will, each of them will try to create its own small empire. And so again, I think we no longer can draw a line where does this lead. We can, then there is ecological catastrophe, will it happen or not, and so on and so on. And this is why the key to all this is in a very ironic way. When people ask me, but what are you? I define myself as a moderately conservative communist. Why? Communist because, let's be serious, new crises will explode. After COVID, other viral crises, maybe wars, who knows what will happen to our environment. And for me, it's not even some big theory. It's kind of a primal evidence, self-obvious thing, that we will need more collaboration, stronger than market. Now people tell me, you are utopian. I tell them, no, look at COVID. I have quite good memories of COVID. Do you know what two big bad guys, both Trump and Boris Johnson, they had to do things which were allowed by constitution only in extreme warlike circumstances, that you can directly, bypassing the market, order some industries what to do. I think we have to prepare for this type of emergency state, because if we don't do it still, as Lorenzo would have put it, in the tradition of enlightenment, then the right-wingers will do it you know. So again, the crucial thing is that I'm not saying everything is contingent. No, there is one narrative line, but it works like what they call in quantum mechanics collapse. When after a thing happens, retroactively it appears as necessary. Now, my beloved example from love, you walk on a street, sorry for the stupidity, you slip on a banana, and there is a lady there who helps you to stand up. And then it may happen you discover it's the love of your life, you know. And then you automatically read all your life as leading to that point. So the key point is, finish with this simple progressism, becoming aware that we are now literally in a state of superpositions. The last attempt, which was Fukuyama, end of history, failed, and Fukuyama, did you get him here? He's not he doesn't understand Hegel, of course, American, Chinese cannot, or whatever, Japanese, but he saw this clearly, and now, do you know that in the last elections he supported Bernie Sanders? He is honest enough here, you know. So again, I think it's not enough. Now I will try to answer very briefly to your question in a more philosophical way. It's not enough to say, okay, natural sciences tell us what nature is, history is totally different. No, I think that if we want to take seriously the contingency, the openness of history, at some level, of course different from spiritualism, we have to locate it already in nature. We need a different notion of nature, because today even nature, natura, is no longer what it was. Traditionally, our notion of nature was a stability, you know, like the usual anti-humanist reading of ecology. Nature was okay, stable, homeostasis, reproducing itself. Then we humans emerged, and in our hubris we destabilized it. My answer is, sorry, are you crazy? What is now our source of energy? Oil, coal. Can you even imagine what mega ecological catastrophes had to happen on our Earth so that we have all these reserves of energy? So my answer to insult deep ecologists is, yes, there is Mother Nature, but Mother Nature is not a caring mother, but a dirty, corrupted bitch. No? Like, to accept this openness, I think, and I will try to develop in today's talk, in what a perfect way quantum mechanics proposes a kind of, even, I'm not afraid of this term, ontological foundation of a different relationship to history. Jean-Pierre Dupuy, D-U-P-U-Y, my good friend who shuttles between California and Paris, he is the best theorist of catastrophes that I know. And his idea is that it's no longer good enough to be simply a realist pragmatic. Let's look at it realistically, maybe ecological catastrophe will happen, maybe not, and so on. No, he developed this wonderful dialectic where he says, once a catastrophe happens, it appears retroactively necessary. But the way to counteract is, and he gives wonderful examples, is to accept it as necessary, but nonetheless in a crazy way counteract it. And I will give you an example which is, of course, not ours politically. You know, people often say Reagan and right-wingers went crazy in Solzhenitsyn years when they worried, oh my God, did Soviet Union won? But precisely that conviction that we already lost mobilized people. And at the end, it was Soviet Union which lost. So my idea is there is destiny, but we can retroactively rewrite our destiny itself. That's how we should act. Take the catastrophe very seriously. And you know where we can also, I'm a materialist, I'm Christian atheist. We can learn here from intelligent theologians, who knew you must always begin with, we are lost, condemned, devil runs this world. And then you don't say, okay, let's go to sleep and watch TV series, who cares? This mobilizes you, you know. I think that today, if we go into cheap pseudo-optimism, oh, but it's not so bad, artificial intelligence will help us, blah, blah, it's even more dangerous. That's my big question. You know how I would begin? This makes us think, what do we mean by artificial intelligence? By humanity. Because if you mean intelligence, fast mechanical operations, or course if will beat us. So whenever I am asked this question, I use two, and I have others, but two most obvious examples. The first one, I now found a book on everyday rituals. For example, I don't know, you know, when you walk on a floor with big squares, many people have this rule, you shouldn't step again on the... Can artificial intelligence develop this, which is meaningless? Just you feel a need to obey this. Second thing, which I take very seriously, I got this from Lacan and from Kierkegaard, the greatest theologist. Swearing, cursing. Can artificial intelligence swear? But not, of course it can if you program it. But you know what is the function of swearing, cursing, dirty words? It's something much deeper. It's an admission that you lack the proper word. It's a way to register this gap, as Hegel put it nicely. We live in language, but at the same time we are never at home in language. There is a gap. You always fail. So this swearing means, oh my God, I cannot even put in words what. I find much more interesting the question of artificial intelligence at this level, because I think this is the core of our humanity. On the other hand, I'm not a naive conservative here. You know what's quite possible? Why do we always compare artificial intelligence to humans? And will it reach us? Will it go beyond us? What I found the most probable thing is that artificial intelligence, maybe develop its own, for the lack of better word, I call it spirituality, but which will move at a totally different level. You cannot even compare it with human spirituality, you know. Here, totally share the view. I didn't learn about it today, of my, hopefully, in the future, good friend, Lorenzo Marsili. And here I don't agree with people like, we are both friends with him, Yanis Varoufakis, who likes to repeat, Europa is kaput. No. I think that the first symptom is that what unites all around the world, left and right, they all hate united Europe. For example, Latino Americans claim Eurocentrism the worst. In Africa, you did the slavery, blah, blah, first. Here I learned from intelligent right-wingers. It's not true. You know that the Muslims got more slaves from Eastern Africa than Latin Americans from the West. So then Putin against Europe, everybody, China and so on. Why is this happening when everybody is telling us Europe is over, but at the same time Eurocentrism is presented as the ultimate enemy? No, I think today history took care of, under quotation marks, bad aspects of Eurocentrism. But what remains is, are we aware, one argument, that even those who criticize European legacy, they do it strictly in the terms which were articulated by the European legacy. European Enlightenment is the only civilizatory view which includes, this will sound Stalinist, but I don't mean it, which includes self-criticism. In this sense, I think, look at the other models. Latino-American left, okay, we know where Hugo Chavez and others finished. United States, European neoconservatives, it's a catastrophe. China, I respect them, but still, in contrast to another of my good friends who was here, Wang Hui, I don't think this Chinese attempt will propose a truly post-capitalist alternative. It's more complex. India, God forbid, no thanks. So I think, yeah, let's do all this standard whipping your back European masochism, but after all that, sorry, Europe is still the only thing we had. For example, I had a couple of years ago a debate with Judith Butler. And she was, as is fashionable, against European tradition, cogito, Cartesian, masculine, and so on. But I told her, but are you aware that modern feminism begins with Descartes? Many women already read Descartes, and they said, because cogito doesn't have a sex, it's not, because pre-modern advocacy of women's rights is strictly disorganic, cosmic principle, yin, yang, masculine, feminine, they must be brought in balance. No, this is not the world of modern feminism. It begins with Descartes. So I still absolutely shamelessly insist that I wouldn't even say with all the necessary self-criticism, because authentic European legacy is already radically self-critical. So more than ever, today we have to say Europe is our only hope.